Hi everyone, this is another video. As you can see, I am back in my office. I just returned this week, so I'm excited to be back home at UTA. If any of you ever is in campus, for those of you who take both in classroom and online courses, know that while I don't have a formal office hour, um, for online courses, I am happy to greet you and meet you in my office. So, just wanted to extend that courtesy now that I'm here. You just need to send an email, and I'll be happy to meet with you if you have questions, particularly regarding homeworks or the final examination. So, this video is going to be about addressing some of your fears and concerns related to interviewing children and adolescents. And as usual, I made like a little list of questions and concerns that students have so that I can address pretty much common concerns or things that I think are important to address. So, while reading your comments, I noticed several things. There seems to be quite a big fear of two things. One is including parents during the interview process, and the other one is how to manage your own emotions, right? For example, or your own concerns. For example, some students were afraid of asking the wrong questions, other students were afraid of transferring emotions, other students were afraid of not being able to control themselves when a child or an adolescent shares a difficult or painful experience, or fears or concerns about being unable to connect with children and adolescents. And I want to take a moment to address that because I think fears are, while they are valid because they exist within you and you can feel them, I always tell my students that fears are just emotions that come and go as any other emotion in life. And you get to choose when you put your specific fear in a little trash bag and throw it out the window. So just remember that while it is absolutely okay and normal to feel these emotions, that doesn't mean that you don't have any control over them or that you cannot work with them as you learn new skills and you work with children and adolescents. So basically, you regarding the fear of working with parents, I think it's a fear that all that have worked with children and adolescents have to a certain degree because for many reasons. For example, some of us are not parents, others have their own personal experiences with their own parents, and they might not always be positive. So when they interview a child and a parent comes in, it might trigger or remind them of their own parental experiences with their own parents, right? Other folks are just afraid of how parents are generally going to react, particularly because they see you as a student in training and not as um, a like a full-on social worker with a license. I think those are things that we just need to navigate and work through in supervision and through self-talk. I did notice that a lot of you, while you had these concerns, a lot of you were really good at providing, pretty much every one of you, at providing your own solutions, or self talking yourself through it. And I think that's really great and important, because there's really nothing that you can do in terms of not having those fears. They are there for a reason. We just need to learn how to manage them, and kind of learn how to work through them because you cannot control how a parent reacts, right? You cannot control how a parent will take your message. What you control is how you deliver your message and how you sort of interpret the parent's reaction and what you do with it. So, just for you to keep in mind, um, I think a lot of you mentioned a couple of things that are really important about being transparent, being honest, being genuine, um, and acknowledging that building a relationship takes time. This goes for the child and this goes for the parent. Remember that parents are also afraid if it helps you kind of um, make them more human and help you being less fearful of their reactions. Just realize that they are afraid. They might have their own histories of abuse, of problems, of conflicts in their relationships. Some parents might lack certain skills, and some parents may just be terrified, right? They might be afraid of what's going to happen with their child, or they're being unable to handle or manage their child. So just have that general compassion and understanding that sometimes people react the way they do because they are afraid, or they don't understand, or they have had bad experiences, and that brings a lot of negative feelings in them. It's not necessarily against you, or that they don't want to participate or engage in treatment, but just see it holistically and do not personalize, or try not to, and do not think that it's that they don't really have the child's best interest, or they do not want to engage with you. Sometimes there will be the case that parents, they lack certain skills, or they, for whatever reason, might not be really engaged in the care of the child. But for the most part, I think parents have their child's best interest. They just don't know um, how to handle it or how to manage it, again, based on their own experiences and their own problems, and their own life histories. So keep that in mind, because I think that's going to help you humanize and feel a little bit more comfortable. And again, you don't control how the parent reacts, right? You control what you say and the energy you transmit to that parent. And also, it's okay, related to some of your fears with parents, it's okay to voice your concerns, right? It's okay to bring to parents' awareness how you felt about the parents' reaction. What are your thoughts? Because a lot of the times parents really haven't been confronted with this. And if you tell them in an educational, polite way, that you're kind of saying this because you want to get to understand them better, you want them to have a good relationship with you, in the end, they're going to respect you, right? And they will know that you're truly asking these questions not to upset them, not to bother them, but because you want to raise awareness of how they might be communicating certain things, or how they might be reacting, or their body expressions when you say X or Y statement. And it's important. You guys already know it. You have verbalized it in your comments that it's important to be genuine and transparent. So follow these same guidelines with parents, right? If you're feeling something, if the parent bothered you, if the parent had a specific body language or expressed something that you didn't really understand, do the same as you would with a child, right? But do it in a polite and respectful way. Sort of as in the way, this week you mentioned this and I interpret it this way. And because I appreciate our relationship, I want to know if you felt the same way, or if you were even aware of how I might have felt when you mentioned or stated that. Um, and that will help you build a relationship as well. And then relating to children and managing your own emotions, and expressing yourself, being genuine and transparent with them while handling all positive and negative emotions that might arise. I think I already said it in a video. It is not your role to protect a child, right? It is not your role to convince a child of X or Y. You are there to help the child find a way to heal from whatever problems they are going on. I know it's natural for many of us to protect children, but this is not like any other relationship. This is a professional relationship, and you are there as a co pilot of the boat. Believe in the strengths, believe in the abilities, believe in the capacities a child has. to manage problems. And I think um, never be afraid of expressing your emotions. You don't need, there was one of you that mentioned something that I think it's important to address about suppressing emotions. You don't really need to suppress any emotions. You don't really need to control yourself to a degree that you are not able to be who you are, because that's also part of being transparent and genuine. Obviously, you want to keep yourself checked, but expressing how you feel and what you're thinking might also help the client gain awareness of some things that they are or are not doing in terms of behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs that they are having. So, I want to discourage you from feeling that you need to be always in control and in check when you're with either children, adolescents, or um, adults. And there is one last thing that I want to address in this respect. There was another student that mentioned that she felt in one of her sessions that she sort of let the child be who they was, in terms of uh, playing in a way that didn't look developmentally appropriate, or acting in a way that, according to the student, didn't feel right. And it seemed to me that the student felt a little bit guilty, or felt that he or she was not handling this appropriately. So I know the student know who the student is because she gave a really beautiful example. I want to let that student know it's absolutely okay to, if you have a 10-year-old kid and your kid is playing like a 7-year-old kid, that is absolutely fine. That means you're attuned, you're connected to your child. I'm going to give a specific example. I had a 19-year-old girl who had difficulties being in the autonomous, being independent from her mother because of a history of attachment issues during childhood. And when I met that child, that adolescent, developmentally, she was around age 4 or 5. So I engaged with her in doll play. We played with house. We played the family. We played different games that are more associated with younger children. But that made the client freed a part of herself that was tied up. So I think you did an excellent job by just bringing your client back to where they were. Just remember, emotional age and developmental age and biological age are two different things. You can have someone that's 11-year-old biologically, developmentally they might be somewhere else depending on their life experiences. So keep that in mind. Do not feel guilty for doing that. Do not feel it's inappropriate, because it is really not inappropriate to just maybe take it a little bit back to where that child or adolescent is. Other aspects that really caught my attention were students that were sort of afraid of adolescents or kids engaging or voicing concerns about suicidality, or self harm behaviors. Again, it goes to the point of things that you cannot really control, right? Do not be afraid to ask those questions, and do not ask them in a childish or in a covert way. Just directly ask them, have you ever tried hurting yourself? If a child needs examples, give them. Because that also signals to the child or adolescent that you're comfortable, that you're in control of yourself, and that you are open to exploring with them any issues that they have, and they will pick up on your language. So ask those questions. They are part of life, and just let them know while you ask them that either you or other children that you know sometimes have experience a lot of stress, a lot of worries, and when you're really worried, sometimes you don't really want to be here anymore. You want to disappear, you want to be somewhere else. You don't want the worries to be in your mind anymore. So do not kind of replicate the same stigmatization that is out there. Ask freely and openly about these issues in a language, in an appropriate way for the kids or the adolescents. Um, Age, right? And I think those were kind of like the main issues that I um kind of found. This video is becoming a little bit long at this point. I think, oh yes, One last aspect that I wanted to mention was one of the students mentioned the issue of stigmatization at a young age, and with that, I'm gonna cap it off. I think this is great that the student mentioned that because um, we always make the mistake of, particularly in clinical settings, of diagnosing early on. And I really want to hone on this because I think it's really important that you take the time to talk to your client. And maybe in the beginning sessions, just write that unspecified or not otherwise specified diagnostic category until you gather all the information, because precisely of that, a lot of the times diagnoses carry a lot of stigma, and if you're not sure your client has said, you might also inhibit the building of rapport and trust if you misdiagnose early on. So I wanted to bring that on because I think it's really important. If you don't have enough information or you're not sure where your client is at in terms of diagnosis, it is absolutely okay that not otherwise specified is a billable code. If you work in a clinical setting and you need it for health insurance purposes, you don't need to give the most specific on point diagnosis. And I don't think that's a very responsible thing to do either. So take your time to collect collateral data and collect personal data before you go ahead and decide, I think this child needs X and Y diagnosis. I know there were many questions. If you think there is something that I didn't address, just let me know and I'll be happy to answer that. But I'm going to cap it here. And keep in mind that I'm going to be grading and revising your video analysis for this week. I'll provide feedback next week. Bye bye. Take care.